With the latest two episodes of the Book of Boba Fett, I've been seeing a lot of speculation regarding the identity of the armorer. Now, we had a lot of revelations in episode 5, which gave us a bigger idea about the origins of the tribe, as we kind of came to know this group of Mandalorians that Din Djarin belonged to. Now, obviously, there's a lot of talk about Paz Vizsla, who is the descendant, I guess, of Pre Vizsla, who is in turn related to Tar Vizsla, the first Mandalorian Jedi who created the Darksaber. However, I've seen a lot of speculation about the armorer even, because for a very long time, we kind of just assumed that the armorer was a character who was just invented for the Mandalorian, but some people believe that this is actually a pre-existing character who actually first appeared in a comic book. That character is Rook Kast, and this is actually such a popular theory that Rook Kast became a trending page on the Star Wars wiki, even before characters like Cad Bane, who we saw in this latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett. Rook Kast actually has more traffic on her page than Cad Bane, which is very shocking. Now, why do people believe that the armorer could be Rook Kast, and who is Rook Kast? If you haven't seen the Star Wars animated show, The Clone Wars, then you would be unfamiliar with this character. However, even if you have watched the Star Wars Clone Wars animated show, I still think it would be forgivable for you to have forgotten who this character is exactly. Rook Kast is a Mandalorian who sided with Death Watch and Pre Vizsla during the crisis between the new Mandalorians and the old Mandalorians during the Clone Wars. When Maul was able to defeat Pre Vizsla and take the Darksaber to become the ruler of Mandalore, Bo-Katan and the Night Owls actually rejected his role and defected. However, some of Death Watch actually ended up being loyal to Darth Maul, and that is where we see Rook Kast. Rook actually first appeared in the Star Wars comic Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. Eventually, she would be included into the Clone Wars animated series in the 7th season during the Siege of Mandalore, where she sided with Darth Maul. She's actually given a few speaking lines portrayed by Vanessa Marshall, who is the voice actress of Hera Syndulla in Star Wars Rebels. Now, the reason why people are speculating that the armorer could be this character, I believe, is because of some of the comments that she made regarding Bo-Katan, the armorer in the last episode of the Book of Boba Fett, and also regarding her connection to the Children of the Watch, which a lot of people are speculating has some sort of connection to Death Watch. Now, this is about all of the evidence that we have that points to these two characters being related in some sort of way. We know that the armorer belongs to the Children of the Watch, which is sort of a religious group sect within the Mandalorian culture. They're the ones who are very strict about not removing their mask and not showing anyone their face. But the rest of Death Watch actually doesn't follow this rule at all. And we actually know that Rook Kast was not a part of the Children of the Watch, and she was actually just a part of the regular Death Watch because we see her multiple times with her mask off. Now, I kind of believe that alone pretty much summarizes why I don't believe these two characters are the same. I actually believe, even though Death Watch and Children of the Watch are probably very closely related, especially considering that Din Djarin was saved by Death Watch, as we see in The Mandalorian, I'm not really sure about the idea that the Children of the Watch were sort of a group that came up after the Siege of Mandalore, although I guess that could be the case, that a lot of these Death Watch kind of defectors then became the Children of the Watch. However, it seems much more likely that Din Djarin was saved during the Clone Wars when Death Watch was still active, and he was brought into the Children of the Watch through the Death Watch rather than the Death Watch becoming the Children of the Watch, and then Din Djarin adopting like a new entire religious view. It doesn't really make sense because Din Djarin seems to think that all Mandalorians follow the Children of the Watch. So if anything, I think what happened is that Din Djarin was saved by Death Watch, and then after being saved by Death Watch, he was probably either sought out some sort of Mandalorian group or was taken in by the Children of the Watch rather than by Death Watch, who maybe weren't really interested in taking younglings in that way. Or perhaps there is some sort of connection between Death Watch and the Children of the Watch, where Death Watch would give over some of the younglings to the Children of the Watch. Aside from just the fact that we know that Rook Kast was not a part of the Children of the Watch at one point, and that the Mandalorian seems to think that the armorer was always, a part of this group, I think it also makes very little sense for the Mandalorian to portray the armor in a very different way that Rook Kast is portrayed in her appearances. Although we do have very few appearances of Rook Kast, not only does she have a completely different voice to the armorer, who the armorer has a very distinct way of speaking, to be honest, a way of speaking that I would think that they would want to carry over, especially between live action and animated, where the voice maybe is the best indicator of who the character is. But Rook Kast speaks in a sort of British accent, whereas the armorer has a much more untraceable kind of accent. It's kind of somewhere in between a British accent and like a mid-Atlantic accent. The actress of the armor actually said that she based some of it off of The Lord of the Rings. And the fact that Vanessa Marshall portrayed Rook Kast and also portrayed Harrison Dula, I would think if they're going to bring back Rook Kast into live action, that they would try to maybe give this role to Vanessa, because Vanessa probably is not going to be the person who portrays Harrison Dula in live action. I would be very surprised if that ended up being the case. I mean, I would like that. I mean, I don't think there would be a problem with that. But I think that that Lucasfilm and Disney are much more interested in maybe getting a more kind of a name brand celebrity into that role, since Harrison Dula is such an important part of Rebels. So I think it would be better for Dave Filoni to maybe utilize Vanessa Marshall as a character for a different one of her different roles. So maybe for Rook Kast in that scenario, because I think she could probably portray her in live action pretty well. I just think that there's not a lot of evidence to this theory. So this makes me think that this theory is pretty much just baseless speculation at best. And don't get me wrong, I like some baseless speculation. But I think if there was more like of a connection between the Children of the Watch and the Death Watch, or maybe if there was more than just her shitting on Bo-Katan, because we know pretty much the entire Mandalorian people probably hate Bo-Katan after she was basically responsible for the purge of Mandalore, at least from their perspective. So I think, just her having a hatred for Bo-Katan is not enough. Bo-Katan was probably a very, very popular figure in Mandalorian culture. I mean, she was the sister of Duchess Satine, who was the former ruler of Mandalore, who was overthrown by Darth Maul, and then Bo-Katan became the ruler during the Empire, rose up against the Empire, and then that led to the purge of Mandalore. So you could see how a lot of people would view Bo-Katan as being like a really terrible leader. I think that there could be a chance that the armor ends up being a character from one of the animated series. I think it's maybe not very likely, because how many Mandalorians do we really know of? I think it would make more sense for this just to be a new character altogether. And I think that also makes sense with Paz Vizsla. I mean, we never really saw Paz Vizsla before. We saw Pre Vizsla, who was maybe a direct relative, but we don't really know what their relation is. And I think it would make sense if maybe some of the Death Watch were very religious and belonged to this other kind of doctrine, the Children of the Watch. But who knows? I mean, it could be that the Death Watch, after sort of the fall of Darth Maul, turned into the Children of the Watch. It just seems like that's not really what they're implying with all of the history they're bringing up about Concordia and about the armor and the purge and Bo-Katan. It feels like maybe that they kind of have a longer history, right? Especially with regards with how Bo-Katan views the Children of the Watch. She seems kind of to have some foreknowledge of them, maybe like viewing them as being this very religious sect that she encountered after fleeing or after defecting from the new Mandalorians and then joining Death Watch. Maybe she viewed like this kind of group of people on Concordia as being this very weird cult-like. I mean, because that's kind of what they are, right? Of course they could do anything. I just, I think it's a little shocking that people really are hitching a lot onto this theory, because I think it makes more sense that the armor is just sort of its own character, right? I don't think Rook Kast being like, what does it really add to the character of the armorer? I guess it could tie it back to Darth Maul in some way. I don't know. I don't really buy this theory. I just don't really buy this theory. I think it makes more sense that she's just sort of her own character. Maybe we'll see her appear in the animated show, but probably more like the Bad Batch if we do, because I think in terms of like the characters we already know of in the Clone Wars, I don't really see her having a direct, connection. I guess Rook Kast would kind of be the best one, but I don't think it's a very strong connection. Like I think if they were going to try to make this character Rook Kast, wouldn't they do more to imply that it's Rook Kast? Wouldn't they try to match her voice more? Wouldn't they try to, I mean, because Rook Kast has been a character in the animated series since 2014, and we know that The Mandalorian was in development, right? So they could have looked at what they were already doing with Rook Kast and then go in that direction. I don't think it really makes sense for them to just generate this whole new character with a whole new style of speaking, a whole new philosophy, like a completely different. I mean, it's a completely different character from Rook Kast. Really, they seem like complete different, like almost complete opposites. Where Rook Kast maybe seems more cynical and more willing to side with Darth Maul, where the Children of the Watch seem at least very principled in their belief, right? Which doesn't really seem a lot like what Rook Kast is. Tell me what you guys think about this theory. Do you guys believe that the armorer is Rook Kast? I mean, I think I've pretty much gone over why I think that there's problems with that theory. I am going to make more Book of Boba Fett content, so keep your eyes out for that. I do want to go over maybe some of the history of the Vizslas, of Tar Vizsla. If you guys like this video, please go ahead, leave a like, leave a subscription, and I will see you guys on the next one.